Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're as encouraged as I am by the turnout tonight. And my name is DJ Vincent. I get to work for the Salem Leadership Foundation. And if you look up here on the screen, our role as SLF is to build partnerships between people of faith and people of goodwill so that we can see our city become a city of peace, the healthiest community in Oregon. And it's because of you in this room that that's possible. And it's because of true collaboration with the folks up here on the screen that we're able to offer more warming center opportunities than we've ever had. So we'll talk in detail about each one of these partners, but I first want to thank the First Presbyterian Church and Rob Thrasher for hosting us tonight. And I want to thank Arches and Community Action Agency for serving as the backbone of this collaborative and really spearheading us having coordination, being able to offer 3 sites, being able to raise the temperature to 32 degrees. And so they have been at the forefront of hearing our community and organizing around both the need and the community desire to do more. So if we go to the next slide, here's what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to look at what is a warming center, our nightly schedule. We'll look at volunteer job descriptions, volunteer expectations, what the health and safety tips are, what we expect of our guests, and then how do you get signed up each time. So next, the population that we're looking to serve are those who aren't already sheltered. And we often talk about it as the 3 Ps, those who have pets, people with partners, and people with possessions. Honestly, we're hoping that folks would access our great partners at Union Gospel Mission, Salvation Army, but we're all aware as a community that we don't have enough shelter beds, and there are consistent barriers for some folks to access those shelter beds. And we as a community are coming together and saying, when it's cold, we are going to meet the needs of those folks. And it says it right there, our mission is to save lives. There are a lot of amazing churches and organizations in our community that are doing recovery every day of the week. They're doing development every day of the week. But still we have these crisis moments where we need to step up as a community and say, no one in our community is going to die out on the streets because they're cold. One quick story, I've been involved in this effort for 4 years, and the first year I was involved with it, I had just met a friend who had just become homeless, and he had just made, some bad decisions, and he was really down in his health. He was sick, and he was able to access, 4 years ago, the warming center most nights. And I was seeing him there, and I was so excited that resource was there for him. And I don't know if he would have made it that particular winter without churches opening up and Arches providing the support for us to have a warming center 4 years ago. And that particular person, I've seen him get a job. I've seen him find a place. I've seen him get married. And I've seen him become a leader in our community. Again, someone who needed the people in this room to step up and to save his life that particular winter. So, new this year, for 3 years, we've been working with churches to open basically one site at a time. And we have been able in some ways to meet the community need because we had a big building over at First Christian, the Energy Building. You know, good news for the community, that's going to be a charter school, and it's going to have a great use, but it wasn't good news for the warming center team. And so, you know, people got creative, and we realized we needed to open more than one site at a time. And so for downtown, every time we activate, Salem First Pres, where you're at today, is going to be open. And then South Salem Friends Church, way out south, is going to be open. And then Church at the Park, which is a community building that operates to meet the needs of homeless folks on the southeast side of town, it's going to be open. So if we turn to the next slide. So those are what we call fixed sites. And new this year, again, last year we basically only did multi-night activations where it was going to hit 27 degrees for multiple nights. It's now any night that we hear from the City of Salem emergency manager that it looks like it's going to be 32 degrees or below, then that's when you could know that we're going to activate. And I'll talk about how we're going to communicate with you. And some of you may already be thinking, well, what happens if we get full? So we already have agreements from other downtown churches that when we hit 90% occupancy, we're going to ask them to open up the following night. And so we would anticipate that would be hopefully the third or fourth night in a row that we would activate. We'll keep moving. So red light status basically means we're not activating. And some of you may be thinking, okay, 32 degrees or below, that sounds like we'll be open more. And you're right. Based on a 3-year study of the temperature, the average nights we might be open is about 36. If it's anything like the last 3-year average. It could be less than that. It could be more than that. We're just going to go with that temperature. So yellow light status, when you've signed up with us and you're on the email list, you will get an email 48 hours out saying you're on standby. Please go to the site if you can volunteer and sign up. And then when we go green light, it'll be noon, the actual day that we're going to activate when you've signed up to help. On that day at noon, if it got warmer all of a sudden, then you'll hear probably, oh, you know, we're still on standby. Or red light, you know, things got a lot warmer. But if it's green light, that means we're a go and we need you to show up. So that'll be a little bit different than last year. Again, with the temperature, with the potential for even just one night activations at our main 3 sites. So let's keep moving. So volunteer to guest ratio. Our plan is to host our guests well, to keep everybody safe, to keep our volunteers safe. We will be working with the fire marshal at all of our sites to have the recommended occupancy, both sleeping, and we can have an occupancy around those who are sitting. And so you can get an idea of ballpark numbers. For the 3 sites, on shift 1, we would need a total of 18 volunteers, shift 2, 13 volunteers, and then shift 3 back to 18 again. And again, if you're thinking what's required of me, basically as a general volunteer, your requirement is to come to this training, hear the expectations and responsibility, and say, I can do that. You don't necessarily need to have other certifications around CPR or first aid. We wanted to clarify that. Again, we're trying to give you a general idea of what the volunteer hours would be. Could I get those who are veterans to raise their hand? Raise your hand if you have helped in a warming center before and volunteered. Thank you so much for already doing that. Also, thank you for giving your time tonight, even though you've already been trained once, coming out and getting the most up-to-date information. And we're going to have a lead training after this for those who are currently tapped on the shoulder as leads, or those who want to hear what a lead does. Our goal is to have consistency across all 3 sites, all 3 shifts, and in everything we do, so that you can depend on that as a volunteer. So you can see the hours there. We're hoping not to burn volunteers out, because we anticipate 3, 4, 5 nights of activation. And so we want you to be able to come out, volunteer, do a great job, feel good about it, and maybe come back the next night and do the same thing, rather than asking people to stay up all night and then you're pretty much done for work. You're not going to come back the next night. You can see the lead volunteer has different expectations. You'll see that going through. There's a little bit more asked of those leads. All right, so let's keep moving. So general view, believe it or not, even though this room is full tonight, we're probably at maybe 140 people trained. With our list of people who've been trained in the past, we're probably over 300 people. On a given night, people can have a lot of different, you want to have a life other than warming center. I know, it's crazy. But it's hard sometimes for us to fill all these volunteer spots. And we're asking for more volunteers than ever. So I want to clarify, our goal is that everyone would have been here who's going to volunteer. But if a person has not been through the training, but they have a will to volunteer, we're creating space in the very first shift of a night that lead volunteer will be ready to do a mini training. And what we're going to ask that person to have done is to have watched the video. Thanks so much to CCTV, who's here videoing the presentation tonight. They're going to make a video look pretty for us and make it available on the Community Action website. And then we would ask, if you have friends who couldn't make it tonight, we'd ask them to watch that video first and then come early on the first shift and kind of walk through with the lead volunteer. So then the first shift, the regular volunteers arrive, they meet their lead volunteer, they sign a waiver so that you're not frustrated. Each site, you'll need to have a waiver on file. So if you volunteer at one of the 3 different sites, they need a waiver on file there. They'll review the job description for the night, kind of find out who's on their team and what the specific roles are for that site. If you're on the first shift, you will help set up the facility, mats, coffee, water, and clothing. Really, the heavy doers, if you really want to feel like you've done something, you can help set up on the first shift. You can help clean up on the third shift. We do need people on the second shift so that people can be safe and their needs met in the middle of the night. But honestly, it's easier. Just to tell you the truth, people sometimes bring a book, and that's okay. You have to be ready to help people in a health crisis or de-escalate, but the reality is you're not lifting a bunch of stuff. The key is follow the direction of your lead. We don't want to leave, even if it's an emergency, without talking to the lead and being released. All right, let's keep moving. So second shift comes on, 7 to 11 p.m. Oh, sorry. We're still working hard on the first shift. So we start checking in the guests. Oh yeah, we don't have any guests yet. You just know what to do. So you're going to check all the guests' belongings. We're going to go into detail on the guest expectations, so I won't linger here. We are not serving full meals. Again, our mission is to save lives, and there are a lot of meals served and a lot of people extending a relationship through meals all over our community. But we are serving warm liquid, bouillon, decaf coffee, and tea. So the guests may leave at any time. This is a free choice to be there. But if they leave, not just step outside to have a smoke, but if they leave the center, people need to know you can't return that particular night. You can come back tomorrow. And the reason for that is just everybody's safety. We don't know where people have been, what they've been doing when they return in the middle of the night. Guests at 10 p.m. are expected to begin kind of quieting down. We do change the lighting, and it is out of respect for all the guests that people are supposed to be quiet. All right, now we're moving on. The transition to the second shift. So shift lead 1 has a lot of reporting to do to shift lead 2 on where the critical concerns are, where issues have been, where folks are medically fragile, where there's been conflict, and they need to pass on all that information to the shift 2 lead so that when that lead briefs their team, they can talk about, okay, we've got these 5 dogs, and we've got these 2 couples, and we've got this couple in the back. They've been fighting quite a bit, and we've got this person. We almost called the ambulance, or we've had 2 ambulance calls, and those 2 people are gone. They may get brought back. Those things all happen, and we'll go into more detail around health and safety. So again, it'll be the lead's job to put you as a volunteer in a place where you can succeed, maybe where you've volunteered before, maybe where you've got a great area of comfort. So they assign the tasks. And again, you're not going to leave until the lead has released you and that third shift person takes over. All right, let's transition to third shift. Again, this is where if you love to work and if you love conflict. How many of you love conflict? Oh man, I'm like the only one. So I always volunteer for third shift. It is a difficult shift, telling someone when it's been freezing cold all night that now is a great time, 6:30 a.m. in the morning, to go out in the freezing cold. It's a really good idea. But they have a school here, and they've got parents with kids showing up here at First Pres, and 80 people have been staying the night here, and we want them to stay the night again tomorrow, and we need to help people understand, I know it's hard, but you need to leave. I know it's hard, but you need to take all your stuff. All your belongings are going with you. And we want you to come back tomorrow. And then after that, then how many people love to clean up? That's like your thing. Okay, there's 2 of you. Excellent. So we're going to clean up all 3 sites in a way that the church is going to be really happy that they're hosting a warming center, that it's going to be clean and it's going to be ready for them to use. And so there's a lot of cleanup that happens. All right. So if we go to the next slide, this might be my last one. Excellent. So I'm much better at just talking than actually following the bullet points. But the warming liquids will be available at South Friends Church. They're serving breakfast. So, you know, if you have people who are super mobile, if they want to go out to South Friends Church, that would take pressure off of down here, and they could get breakfast. And remember, we are emphasizing relationally with guests that they need to take all their belongings each night. We can't start keeping stuff. And then we're cleaning up everything and putting it away so that we're ready to do it again the next night. So that's the general overview and the schedule. And it is my honor to introduce you to Amy, who's going to cover your volunteer job description.
Oh, these make me nervous. Okay. And DJ is a hard act to follow, so hopefully I can do as well. Welcome. So basically, we're going to go over the volunteer job description here. And basically, we're going to just kind of the basics, because there's a lot of on-the-job training when you come in, because you never know what you're going to get. So it's an adventure. So as DJ kept asking questions, if you like an adventure, the Warming Center is a great place to come and volunteer. So basically, we need all of our volunteers to comply with the rules of the Warming Center. Consistency is really important, and that way it keeps all the shifts the same, and it keeps expectation for our guests and for our volunteers the same. If you're having trouble following the rules and maintaining them, unfortunately, we may have to ask you to not come back, and we don't want to do that because we appreciate your help so much. You're gonna, again, as DJ went over, we've got the 3 shifts. When you come in for each shift, make sure you find out who the lead volunteer is. They'll usually be here before you are, so that you can meet them, they can meet you. And then they'll kind of look at what the needs are for that shift, for that location, and they'll kind of find out what your interest is, and they'll try to put you in the best area for what you're wanting to do. Shifts are about 5 hours, so it is a commitment, but it goes pretty quick as a rule. So prior to that, as far as responsibilities, attend the volunteer orientation, which you're all doing right now. Again, DJ mentioned the volunteer confidentiality policy and waiver agreement. We'll ask you to sign that again at each location if you're at multiple. During an activation, again, you'll get an email. We'd love you to sign up. You'll get an email from someone saying, hey, we're going to be open. Be sure that you're ready to be there on time. Again, meet with your volunteer, and your whole crew will meet just to kind of give a brief overview of what's been happening if you're second or third shift, what's going to happen on first shift. Go over any kind of issues, assignments, all of that. First shift, too, you'll be assisting, and throughout the night, you'll assist with getting guests checked in as well as their belongings. And then we'll also assist with getting their belongings out to them and out of the building. We've got the warming service going on, so we'll always need to have someone there assisting with that, making sure we've got the hot water, coffee, all of that going. And then there's also an hourly monitoring of all restrooms, and that's for a couple things. One, it could be just if a lot of people have been here, we might need some supplies replenished. It could be that somebody isn't feeling well, so we need to check on them. Might just be that there's been a mess made. So we want to do that to help out our host sites and make sure that they welcome us back again in the future, which could be the next night even. So keep those cleaned up. We also expect our volunteers to assist with regular cleaning and upkeep of the site. We're not asking you to do above and beyond, but depending on what shift, just basic cleanup. Volunteers are also going to monitor the sleeping areas, make sure guests are comfortable. If a guest is noisy, we're going to remind them that it's quiet. If you need help from your lead volunteer, check in with your lead volunteer for help with that. There's also the morning breakdown and cleaning of the site, which includes wiping down the mats, cleaning up the warming liquid service, that sort of thing, wiping down counters, tables, that sort of thing. And then, as every job description has, other duties as assigned. So, which I'm learning every day are growing. But usually it's not too bad. And again, just want to reiterate, please don't leave without letting the lead volunteer know. As a rule, we would prefer to have the lead say, yes, go ahead and go home. We do understand things pop up. If you need to leave for some reason, make sure you check in with your lead volunteer before leaving for your shift, if that has to happen. Is this still under job description? Expectations, yes? Okay. So expectations, again, it's important to follow the procedures for the warming center for the safety and consistency of guests and for our volunteers. If there is a situation that arrives and you need guidance, look for the lead volunteer. They've probably done this either through the warming center or through a place of employment. So they're used to working with folks and can assist with that. And if you do have a suggestion for the warming center, please, we're gonna have a shift summary page, and go ahead and put it in there and we'll take a look at it. It may or may not be something that can be done, but we'll definitely look at it. You never know where the next great idea for making a better warming center is gonna come from. Our values for this are compassion, acceptance, accountability, teamwork, respect, and integrity. And we expect that you as volunteers will embrace that and exhibit those at all times. So we also have the confidentiality piece. So it's really important to gain and maintain the trust of our guests that are using the warming center, that we maintain that confidentiality. If you violate that, we are going to ask you to not volunteer anymore. But it's basically to protect the guests, and we want to treat them with dignity. We want to protect our folks that are our volunteers that are coming in. Again, trust among your other volunteers, not just the guests, and then just to continue that into the future. Boundaries. So we do expect that all who participate in the warming center are going to conduct themselves in a friendly and professional manner when interacting with guests. So definitely want to be aware that there can be a perception of favoritism, and that does not work well for the guests that come in, as well as the community as a bigger picture. We want to treat all of our guests equally and with respect. We also want to make sure that volunteers have clear boundaries when working with our guests. When you're volunteering and interacting with the guests, other volunteers, we expect that respect is given and received on all sides. So not just you towards other volunteers, you towards the guests. We're expecting that the guests are treating you respectfully as well as the other volunteers. And if conversations become unhealthy, they need to be redirected. And while it's not on here, if you ever need help with that, go to your lead volunteer and they can assist you with that. See, volunteers should never give or loan our guests money or personal items. Take guests home. Please don't transport them in your vehicles, or tell them where you live. You want to provide or offer, offer transportation anywhere. We don't want to be giving out any guests or any gifts to any guests. And we don't want to give, receive, or exchange personal phone numbers with a guest. Also, we don't want you to enter into a relationship where money or services are exchanged as a result of a connection with the program. And it all can seem really nice in that you're just trying to help them, and that's a great thing to want to do, but it can be a violation of boundaries, and it also can cause some very unhealthy and some very dangerous potential relationships between the guests and between you as a volunteer. One thing to keep in mind, a lot of our folks that are using the warming center, they are often felt that they're invisible, which they are oftentimes, not treated as well as they could be, not treated with respect. And so some of our guests, any little bit of that is perceived as something that it isn't. So we just want to be aware of that so that we don't create something that we didn't intend to. So some questions to consider and examining any kind of boundary issues. So these are just some things to keep in mind if you're not sure. Is it in the guest's best interest? Whose needs are being served? Is it yours or is it the guest's? Sometimes there's something that we feel like, this is going to be best for them, but is it really best for them, or is that how you feel it is? Will this have an impact on the service being offered? So is it going to impact them being able to continue to utilize the warming center? Should I make a note of my concerns or consult with the shift leader? How would this be viewed by the guest family or significant other? How would I feel telling a colleague about this? Am I treating this guest differently? Does this guest mean something special to me? Am I comfortable in documenting this decision or behavior in the site log? And does this violate the volunteer expectations? So basically, if you're questioning whatever it is that could happen or might have happened, then definitely check in with your lead so that we can help address it if needed, or talk through it and be able to sort out what's happening with that. Physical contact. We don't want any physical contact with our guests. So, I mean, you can it can be, again, a misunderstanding with our folks as far as your kindness is something larger than it is. We also want to make sure that we don't discriminate. We cannot discriminate against any guest based on appearance, gender, age, sexual orientation, race, or religion. So they're just a person here utilizing our resources. Some strategies for de-escalation, which do happen, is simply listening. Use appropriate body language. If you're going to stand there with your arms crossed and talk to a person, that's perceived as very threatening. Hands behind your back can too, especially if they've experienced any kind of hospital stay, especially if it's a state hospital or a mental health ward in a hospital. If somebody comes at you with their hands behind the back, they probably have a shot to give you to calm you down. So just some things to keep in mind. And there's all sorts of other things, but those are two big ones. I know I cross my arms a lot. It's struggle sometimes just to kind of keep my arms down. So make sure you listen, use appropriate body language. Have the guests remove themselves from the situation, and it might just be asking them to step into a different area of the warming center. Sometimes just getting them out of that space is enough, and it'll kind of calm them down. Refocusing the person or on something positive, changing the subject, trying to motivate the person. Use calm, monotone voice. Don't overdo it. Don't try to match where they're at. So if they're very elevated and talking very fast, try to just make sure that you keep your voice at a level tone, and you can slow your speech down a little bit, but don't slow it down too much. Give them choices. As simple as, if you want to stay here, I need you to stop doing whatever it is. It's your choice. You can stay here and you can be warm, or you can go and you're going to have to unfortunately be out in the cold, and I don't want you to be out there. So things like that, choices, and it's on what they choose to do. And then setting limits. So what is the limit? What is kind of what the end is? What's the limit that we can allow for that? So and that's the basic volunteer. So onto the lead volunteer job description. So if any of this does sound interesting, stay afterwards and we can talk a little bit more about it. So the lead volunteer is the person who's responsible in each shift. Is specifically trained in all areas of the warming center activities. And then lead volunteers on first and third shift will be aided for a couple extra hours by a site representative. So that'll be somebody from the location that the warming center is at. They're going to be familiar with the building. They're going to kind of be able to give you some ins and outs if there's something that pops up. Again, for lead, the shifts are 5 to 6 hours. It just kind of depends on which shift you're on. Responsibilities for a lead volunteer. It's essential that as a lead volunteer, you comply with the procedures of the warming center and guide your volunteers to do the same. Again, consistency with how we're implementing all of our rules is important, and an understanding of that process. So we've got the time for the lead volunteer hours: shift 1 at 5:45, shift 2 10:15, and shift 3 2:45. That gives the lead volunteer an opportunity to talk with the lead on the shift that they're just coming off of, and again, as it was mentioned by DJ, kind of what's been going on, and allows the lead to have time to talk to their volunteers for the night and assign duties that need to be done for the evening, or for the shift, I should say. Let's see here. So some more responsibilities. While they're waiting for the volunteers to arrive, they can meet with, again, the prior lead. If you're on the first shift, obviously, meet with the site reps that are there, or site reps, so you can get a good feel for the building if it's a building you haven't been in. Where the fire extinguisher is, first aid kits, exits, all of that. If you're coming on a shift 2 or 3, go ahead and take a look at the volunteer log, any kind of incidents that may have happened, so that you're aware of that as well. And then with shift 1 only, again, they will facilitate new volunteer trainings for those who haven't come to this tonight. Let's see here. So also, they'll meet with their volunteer team. They're going to go ahead and confirm that all members have signed the volunteer confidentiality policy and waiver agreement and provide emergency contact, have volunteers sign in. We're going to review the incident log with the team if we need to, review duties and assign volunteers, again, based on the site and the needs, and then answer any questions that any of the volunteers might have for that shift. Along with that, they're going to go ahead and monitor the activities for safety and compliance. And again, they're the person that you're going to go to if you have a question as a volunteer. And they're also going to work with the site rep that's there if there's anything that pops up. And then they're regularly also going to check in with any volunteers, the volunteers, to see how they're doing, if there's anything that they need, any kind of assistance. They're also going to help monitor the sleeping area to make sure guests are comfortable, no one is disturbing anyone else. There's a noisy guest, they're going to ask them, to remind them of the quiet hours. They're also going to be the ones to probably do most of the de-escalation or asking guests to leave as well. Most likely the lead is going to be the one that's going to be checking the bathrooms every hour for cleanliness, stocking items, safety, all of that. If an incident occurs, it may or may not rise to the level of 911 calling. The lead is going to fill out an incident report with full details, make a reference to the report in the volunteer log for the incoming shift, so the next shift is aware of what's happened. At the end of the shift, they'll fill out a volunteer log with just a brief description of the shift and pass on building, other important information to the incoming lead volunteer. I think that's it. Not sure who's coming up next. Question? Yes.
I got a question. A couple of years ago, we had the ice and snow,
Mm-hmm.
and the volunteers that couldn't come in, you guys had them taxis grab them and bring them. Are you going to be doing that?
I believe we're working on that and how we can make that happen for sure, because we want our volunteers to get here safely. So that information will come. We'll let you know. Yes.
First of all, most of the people in the room can't see the screen and don't have the printed handout. So where can we access this? Through the Community Action website?
I believe we're on our website and we can email it out to folks if they want it.
Most of the people in the room can't see the screen, and only about 1 of 5 of us have the printed handout in front of us. So everything we've gotten is just been listening. I'm wondering where we can access this stuff online later.
Yes, so you'll be able to access it on the Community Action Agency website. We're sending out via Facebook. This is being recorded on CCTV. And it's going to be accompanied with the PowerPoint itself. So it's going to be on that. We'll be sending it out via the email listserv, so please make sure you're signed up for that. And then you'll also be getting the hard copy manual via email as well.
Am I correct that you only need to sign a waiver once at each location? If you come multiple nights, you don't need to sign it again and again?
Correct.
Okay. And am I also correct that if somebody shows up with a load of donuts in the middle of the night, we are to politely thank them but turn them away and say thanks but no thanks?
Yes.
And breakfast at South Salem is going to be served by our volunteers or by that facility?
Their facility. They're providing that. Yes. Yes.
Could you clarify on the sign up, because we're going from one day to another day, so that gets a little confusing.
So we'll be sending out an email that says, hey, it looks like it's going to happen. We would like you to sign up. So it's kind of on a day by day, which is a little bit more of a challenge for folks. Whereas before when we did the predicted days out, but yeah.
What I'm referring to is if it's the night, let's say the 3rd and the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people sign up thinking 3rd shift the 4th, and it winds up being the 5th. You know what I'm referring to now?
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to make sure that people understand what shifts they're signing up
Ashley should answer that.
Yeah, I think that's a.
Ashley, can you repeat the question? Or just include it in your answer?
All right. Hi, Ashley Hamilton. I'm actually going to ask you, sir, to please repeat the question. I caught the last half of that.
Okay, what I've seen it sometimes in years past, it's a little confusing because the night spans 2 days.
Yes.
So if someone signs up and they're thinking that they're doing one day's evening and it's the morning or something of that nature.
It'll be on the sign up log, and you're only signing up for 1 day, 1 shift. So if it is a temperature range and say we're going 3 or 4 days at a time, you're going to have to sign up for the 2nd day and the 3rd day individually. And we
That's not what it means. If you're signing up to start at 3 a.m. on December 2nd, are you signing up on a sign-up sheet for December 2nd or the shift that starts on December 1st?
it's the night that it started. So it would be 3 a.m. December 2nd, not 3 a.m. December 3rd.
I can add to that. You have to look at the night that it started. Like shift one is at what, 7:30 or whatever the time is?
6:30.
That is the day of the 3 shifts. So if you sign up for the 3 a.m., which I usually do this at 7:30, I'm still looking at that night.
The previous.
Yes, yeah.
The previous
Yeah, it's where it all started, the origin.
the 3 shifts.
Yes.
So that is the day of your first shift, even though it's on the next day. It doesn't
Right.
matter. It's the shift that starts on whatever day it is.
Right, and that's a great clarifying point. Thank you. I do have a section here at the end where we're going to actually walk through what it looks like to sign up this year. So there's a URL that we'll click on here at the end, and hopefully that'll help unravel some of the mystery here, and you'll be able to see it and what that process looks like.
Do you have to go to the site to sign up, or is there a way to do it electronically?
It was going to be sent to you in your email. So I would
just respond to the email.
No, in the email there is going to be a web link. Please click on the web link, and that'll take you directly to the signup.com. And there you can pick your shift and your time. Yeah, so it will be electronically. Yeah.
In the past at the Energy Center, because of the layout, it was pretty easy to accommodate the step out for smoke. And there's always a lot of them, because we have to check in right there, the double doors, they can go out and see them go out, come back in. Like, where is the sleeping area going to be, for instance, in this building?
Well, you're in one. It's just on the other side of that curtain there. And then
I'm thinking of, you don't want somebody wandering through the building to go out and smoke and wandering back in, right? That's what I'm saying.
right, and so a part of the volunteer spots that we've allocated is a roaming component. And so the lead will assign 1 to 2 volunteers to roam the facility in coordinated times in order to keep an eye on individuals coming and going. Specifically, that's what's unique about this facility. I know over at South Salem Friends Church, we're not going to need the roaming component as much. Just the way it's angled, we're going to be able to sit people just in specific corners. So you're going to have eyes on it the whole time. There is a component also for site reps. Site reps are folks from the actual facility itself. It's outside the number of volunteers or even the leads. They are familiar with this space, they're familiar with the facility, and they're also going to help be participating in that roaming aspect too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, most of the facilities will be blocked off to our guests. It's going to be cornered off, so it's very manageable.
Is there any specific training or information that the volunteers will get if animals are on site or expectations of the volunteers?
One of the slides will cover what our expectations are as far as animals, but I'll give you a brief synopsis. We are allowing animals into the facility, but they do have to be kenneled. And we do have kennels being provided by the Humane Society. Yeah, so just a brief synopsis of that. Yeah, all right, let's keep this moving. I guess I'll introduce our next presenter for these slides. It's Jimmy Jones.
Well, good evening. My name is Jimmy Jones. I'm the director of the Arches Project here and the interim director of the Community Action Agency. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some health and safety tips. But before I do that, I'm going to go off script a little bit. I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is desperately needed and noble work that speaks to the better angels of our community. And there is a sort of higher purpose involved in all this. This population that you're going to be helping shelter through some very terrible winter months, are the single most vulnerable and needy population in the city. There are folks who, for the most part, just cannot get access to any kind of shelter because of behavioral issues you'll discover, because of substance abuse problems, because they can't pass a breathalyzer test, because they have animals that they won't give up, because in certain cases they insist on remaining partnered. But in most cases, it has to do with substance abuse problems and mental health issues, which are in the downtown corridor primarily. Most of the population will come from that particular area for these warming centers. It is an enormous crisis of very challenging proportions, and it's something that I and my staff struggle with on a daily basis. We operate a day center on 615 Commercial Street, and I have to tell you that the meth crisis in this town has never been worse. The mental health crisis for the homeless population in the downtown core is an enormously difficult thing for us to cope with on a daily basis. So this is both noble and very desperately needed work. And we just sincerely, from the bottom of our heart, appreciate all of you coming out and willing to participate in this exercise. And we are attempting something, frankly, that has not been attempted in this city before. I mean, we looked at our warming policies going back for years, and there was an enormous amount of interest to expand those into something that looked like the rest of the communities in the state of Oregon, especially here in the valley. So by pushing that temperature up to 32 degrees, we're responding to not only client needs, but also community expectations of my agency and other agencies that we are able to, to end as much suffering as we can over the course of that winter. But on top of that, this is not something that my agency or any agency will be able to pull off on their own. Expanding that warming definition to 32 degrees is going to considerably increase the number of nights that we are open, and it's going to considerably increase the amount of work and help and assistance that we need in order to be able to successfully pull this off. So this is sort of a challenge and an experiment to see if this community can support this level of commitment to end suffering through the course of the winter. And I hope and pray that we'll be able to deliver on that. I've been tasked with talking a little bit about health and safety tips. I want to reinforce a couple of things that have already been said. Your leads in this exercise are people who have done this work before. They've worked with this particular population that I've talked about. They have manned, in certain cases, Russ there in the back, for example, the warming centers for multiple years. They have done this work on a daily basis, like my outreach coordinator, Ken Houghton, who's here somewhere, and he was there, and he's journeyed into the back. Those are the kinds of individuals who are going to be the leads in this exercise. They have particular experience working with this population on a daily basis. They know what they're doing. And when you are in a situation where you have a question, you have a concern, you have a moment of uncertainty about what to do, these rules and these guidelines and these regulations and all the PowerPoint and all the talking points and all that are just fine until you get there that night. And then you have moments of indecision. And that moments of indecision can almost, in every single case, and I have worked warming centers in this city, in Portland, all over, those moments of indecision are almost always pretty simple things that your leads can solve because they've dealt with it repeatedly over and over again. So let's just hit on the high points here. I'm not gonna get into the body of the text on that screen. Most of you can't see it from where you're sitting, but you'll be able to access it by printing it off later. And most of it just reinforms what you see there bolded. Smoking, we don't allow smoking inside the building, and that's going to be a challenge in a lot of cases because almost all of these individuals want to smoke or need to smoke or have been smoking for a very, very long time. One of the things that is necessary in every one of these locations is that there's a designated smoking area outside, and if somebody needs to go smoke, we allow them to do so. We allow them to do so for a variety of reasons, but the biggest one is that it is a stress reliever. It is a de-escalation exercise, regardless of the fact it's unhealthy. And let me tell you what, it's unhealthy. It is one of those things that draws down the tension levels in a warming center or a day center or any population that is consistently smoking. If you're suddenly saying, well, you can't smoke in this facility, you're going to have a lot of problems. So by allowing access to folks to the outside so they can go out and smoke, it's a de-escalation tactic, but we do not allow them to do it inside. Drugs and alcohol, we don't allow them. We have an entry protocol and procedures where we get people to give up their possessions. If they are in particular need of holding on to something, we have a separate protocol where that individual usually just steps to the side and the lead kind of investigates whether or not it's safe to allow them to have those particular items. And many times people try to stash drugs or stash alcohol. My staff deal with this on a daily basis. We either require them to go outside and throw it away or to surrender it, which we don't keep it. We usually just throw it away ourselves, something of that nature, but we do not allow those things inside the facility for obvious reasons. That doesn't mean that you won't find drugs and alcohol inside these warming centers, because people are extraordinarily creative in the way that they hide things. And by creative, I mean they're going to hide things in places you're never going to look. So, and we laugh, but that's every day, all day. But when we do discover it, we require them to give it up. Now, in addition to drugs and alcohol, the other common thing that people will hold on to are weapons. And by weapons, and I don't want to scare anybody because there's no rash epidemic of homeless people anywhere attacking the housed population, no epidemic of homeless individuals hurting people who are trying to help them in terms of these warming centers. In fact, it's almost unheard of. But people keep weapons because they need them to stay safe outside. So they're very, very reluctant to give them up. So they'll stash them in all sorts of places, but we try to keep those possessions away from them. And when we see them, we seize them immediately, or we ask the person to leave. And I had that happen to me several times last winter, and almost in every occasion they were willing to give them up or go a couple of times. That did happen as well. I had one gentleman who had a spear. It was a homemade spear, in the sense it was a knife with duct tape around the end of it attached to a long pole. He was carrying that around town with him. We did not allow that entry into the building. He wanted to know what I wanted him to do with it, and I said, I don't care. It just can't come inside. He ended up hiding it outside in the bushes somewhere, and so we sort of allowed that to pass without incident. But knives in particular, especially for the female population, is something that they use to keep safe. What you will be stunned by, if this is the first time that you've ever done this work, is a large number of women accessing these warming centers. So my background especially is designing homeless systems and doing data analysis on the homeless population. And what you have in Salem is 50% unsheltered female homelessness. So the weapons are just universal, they're endemic, they're everywhere. So we try to get them to give those up as they come in, and that's never really been a problem, but we certainly do not allow them. At the bottom of that, you'll see conflict. We want to avoid that in every possible case. Ken, did we have a fight last winter? Nope, we did not. And the reason we didn't have a fight last winter was that we did a really good job in preventing them from happening. And the way that you do that is we de-escalate conflict. Now, if you're new to this and you're a little uncertain about it or a little bit timid, that sort of thing, I would certainly just encourage you, anytime you see something that's about to kind of get out of hand, and you can get a good sense of that pretty quickly. You can tell when the tension level between individuals is changing. Their body posture changes, their tone of voice, the level of speech changes. Hand those things off to the lead volunteer, because they've dealt with it many times before. So we try to avoid calling the police. We try to avoid calling 911, but when it's necessary to call 911, we're going to do it. Now, I don't think, how many times, Ken, did we do it last year? I don't think we called 911 last year. I called a couple of times for people to report crimes for them that had happened to them on the way to the warming center, but we didn't, Yes, we called 911 for some medical emergencies, and there will be those. We had several of them last winter. But again, just defer to your lead volunteers, and generally everything is there. Medications, this one is a harder one because people are very reticent to give up their medications, because why do you think that's the case? not only do they need them, but they have a long history of those things being stolen from them outside. They can't leave them in their tents. They can't leave them in their bags. They can't leave them on their bicycle. So they're very, very unwilling in some cases to give up their medications. And that's usually just a conversation. Frequently the lead volunteer can have with them if necessary, and we require those to be checked into the bagging system that we have there. And that's always worked pretty well. Every once in a while I'll get a question from a client. I really need to take this medication at 2 a.m. I'm supposed to, and I've got to get up in the middle of the night. I got to come in here. I got to get access to my bag so I can get that medication. And in that case, okay, we will go in there with them. They can check the medicine out of their bag. They can take the medication, but then the medication has to go back into their bag for obvious reasons. Medical emergencies, we're going to call 911 pretty quickly whenever we think anybody is sick or in a state of distress. Now, I've had a bunch of these over the course of my career. A lot of times, the population that we're going to be dealing with is not very healthy at all. I spend a lot of time, again, in that statistical analysis stuff, and I refer to the homeless population as a percentage of it that's chronic. So in our community, the chronically homeless population is about 35% of the total homeless population. That's 20% higher than the national average. So by chronically homeless, those are individuals who are not only been homeless for a year or longer, but they have a mental health problem, a substance abuse problem, or a physical health problem. And for many of them, they're going to die in their early 50s because they just cannot get medical care. They can't get housing. They can't get the help that they need. So many of them are pretty sick. Last winter, Ken and I had one client who, I think it was the first night of the activation. Ken. First night of the activation, he had a major seizure right there in front of us, which is something that is normally easily to handle. But this guy, I walked over to him, and he was turning blue. He was not getting any air into his lungs at all. He was suffocating. And the reason that he was suffocating was that he was having so much mucus discharge, it was getting stuck in his throat and blocking his airway. So I did something I normally don't do there, because you normally don't roll seizure victims, and you just don't do that. You sort of wait, to keep them where they are, get the EMTs in there. But he was dying on me right there. So I rolled him halfway on his side, and then in my hands came out all this mucus. This is my job. I catch this piece of it. And within 2 seconds, he started breathing again, and the EMT showed up 3 minutes later. So I'm there handling this. I'm like, all my guys got my back, and I turn around, no volunteers, leads off over in this direction. All right, I got it. So generally, we don't expect you to do that sort of thing. But if you see somebody who is obviously in a state of distress, alert the lead volunteer. And if you need to call 911 for a medical emergency, do not hesitate to do so. What else we got here? We are not in the practice of giving out any kind of treatment except basic first aid, and in the case where you're trained to do so, CPR. We're not going to administer any medicines. I have a very strict policy. I don't even give people aspirins or Tylenols or Excedrins or things of that nature. That is outside of my purview. There will be repeated requests from clients, from people who are attending the warming centers. Hey, do you have an aspirin? Do you have this? Do you have that? And the general safest practice is to say, no, we don't have those sorts of things. Again, sort of reserve those sort of medical treatments to medical personnel and things of that nature. What else? Next slide. Assisting people with disabilities. Many individuals in this particular population have a disability of some kind or the other. A lot of them have physical disabilities. Some people don't have the ability to be very mobile at all. Some people are missing limbs. There are other types of disabilities in terms of cognitive disabilities that make it difficult for them to navigate physically, geographically, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, we do everything that we can to make sure that anybody who has a disability can get access to our facility. It's absolutely critical that they do so. So we will provide assistance in terms of, moving wheelchairs around, helping people into elevators. I will walk people down the stairs frequently sometimes if I think that they're a falling risk. And that doesn't just apply to people with disabilities, but it also applies to people who have enormous substance abuse issues that just happen to come into the warming center that night. One of the things you're going to find, especially when it gets pretty cold and closer to Christmas, which is, frankly, one of the most traumatic seasons for the homeless that you can possibly imagine, is that the amount of alcoholic consumption goes through the roof. So a lot of people will show up in just fantastically inebriated states. you wondered how they even managed to find the warming center, much less enter the building. So a lot of times we'll walk those individuals down the stairs, and I'll walk in front of them in case, you know, they stumble or something of that nature. But we need to make sure that whenever we can do so, that this situation is adequate and appropriate to the need level that we're assisting. Next page, animals. Oh, this is going to be a problem. I struggle with the animal issue because I understand it. People need companions. And a lot of times people's trauma response is greatly improved by having access to dogs in particular. A lot of women in the camps keep pit bulls with them and other similar breeds for safety measures to keep them safe, because they've been so repeatedly attacked over and over again that the dogs are actually their best protection. We do not allow animals in the warming center to roam free. So when any animal enters the warming center, we will crate them up for the night. We try to, in certain cases where people have expressed anxiety, to make sure that person is sleeping as close to their animal as they possibly can. You'll see a few people there that, you know, continue to kind of visit with their animals and that sort of thing. But again, defer to your lead volunteer whenever there's sort of a question along those sorts of lines. Communicable diseases, safeguarding procedures. Frankly, you need to assume everyone is sick and that you're going to get sick if you are touching any bodily fluids that they may have. That's the safest practice. I assume that every day. Doesn't mean that I always successfully follow it, but you know, the hepatitis C rate, for example, among the homeless population in the city of Salem is 17%. And we know that because we do such close data analysis of all of our interactions. So you need to assume that any contact with urine, blood, feces, anything of that nature is risking infection. And so do what you can to keep yourself safe. Do not contact those bodily fluids. If you see somebody who has defecated on the floor or urinated on the floor, alert your lead volunteer and they will be trained with how to deal with that particular situation. And it is not uncommon, I will add as well, it's not uncommon to see some of these clients who have lived outside for 10 to 15 years be in states of enormous sort of just hygiene need. It's not uncommon for folks to be wearing pants that are heavily soiled in fecal matter and things of that nature. So I realize that's a disgusting subject and something most people would rather not talk about. But again, getting back to that earlier comment about not touching people, this is not only for their safety, but it's for your safety as well. So try to avoid that sort of thing. There have been a couple of times where I've had disabled individuals where I've pulled up pants and things like that for men who were struggling to get clean and things of that nature. But you know, that's my job description and risk that I'm personally taking. And I would encourage you to, again, to defer to your lead volunteer. Another reason not to touch people beyond that, every one of these individuals is living in enormous trauma that is so difficult for the most of the population to understand. And so their trauma responses are frequently triggered by what we would consider to be compassionate pats on the back. Anything that breaches that bubble of protection that they have around them, many of them regard that as a trigger. To many of them, that's a direct threat to their physical safety. So you don't want to do those sorts of things. A few years ago, I had a volunteer who wanted to hug every single individual as they came into the warming center. And I kept reminding them not to do that because, you know, it's traumatic for the clients. They don't want to be touched most of the time. So please avoid that kind of behavior for a lot of different reasons. You'll see, you know, issues with blankets and pillows and that sort of thing. And so we do not allow outside blankets to be brought in for this particular reason, among some others. Another reason is that it's very easy to stash drugs in them and that sort of thing. So we're pretty, and I am pretty, in a lot of things, I try to be very client friendly and try to be very trauma informed, but the bringing in of outside blankets and pillows, that's one thing that I kind of draw the line at a lot with. I make sure that those things are bagged and the supplies that we have on hand. Next slide. If building catches on fire, we all need to leave.
Glad you're here, Jimmy.
As quickly as possible. Don't sit around and observe it. Take photos for Facebook. Bad idea. Speaking of Facebook, it's okay to post, hey, I'm working the warming center tonight. I really encourage my other neighbors and other community members to participate in this way. It's doing something good for our neighbors, and it's something that you can feel great about. But don't take pictures of clients. Don't take pictures of their belongings. Don't take pictures of the dogs. Anything that you're doing to kind of bring attention to yourself is the wrong reason to be here. If you're trying to attract others to come and help and assist in this very desperately needed work, then that's something we want to encourage. But again, be mindful of what you're doing and why. So if the building catches on fire, rule number 1, get out. Rule number 2, make sure you get the client population out. Number 3, we're going to call 911 so they can come and put the fire out. We ever had a fire? Okay. I'm running out of time. Is that what you're telling me? It's hand signals. Earthquakes, do I need to go over that? If the Cascadia event happens, I'm glad to have known you all. And I think you'll be greeted warmly in heaven by having participated in your last dying moments and helping shelter people who otherwise are going to be left outside. But let me tell you, if that thing ever really happens, I don't think this is going to help much. Death in the warming center, seriously? I don't think we've ever had a death in the warming center that I know of. So this is something we all want to avoid for ourselves and for the clients. If some death does occur, we should call 911. It gets better. Guest expectations. All right, so I'm going to leave this to Ken. Ken is my sidekick in all things. We've spent hundreds of hours in all sorts of awful places, and I'm going to turn it over to him. He's more funny than me, so.
No, I'm not. Gosh, it's really encouraging to see a lot of new faces and a lot of old faces. How many of you have worked with me before in a warming center? Excellent. I'm glad to see you all back. So I'm just going to recap on the guest expectations. Some people call them rules. I call them guidelines. The in and out hours. So we're going to open up the doors at 7 o'clock. They're going to have to check in all their personal belongings. In this facility here, if they want to go back out and smoke, they're able to do so. The smoking area is going to be at the top of the stairs. And the smoking area is going to be at the top of the stairs, same door that they all come in. Okay. Beverages at night, we're going to serve decaf coffee, tea, no caffeinated or sugared items. Why? Because we want them to calm down and be respectful of the other guests at 10 o'clock at night. And if they're all sugared up, or if they're caffeinated up, they're going to stay up all night and keep other people awake. Length of stay is on a nightly basis. Smoking, like we've already covered, smoking, they're able to go out and smoke, but there is absolutely no smoking, matches, candles, anything inside the buildings. Personal belongings. We can't say enough about this. They're not going to want to give up their personal belongings, but it's really necessary to keep everybody safe. And I want to touch again on the medications. It's up to the lead person on shift 1. You set the tone for the whole night. You got the most important job of the whole night. You set the tone. If somebody talks about not wanting to give up their medications, it's going to be on the lead person. Pull that individual aside and explain to them that they need to put their medications in the bag so it's safe. They don't have to worry about them getting stolen. And if they need to get their medications at a later time, to go to the lead person to get their medications. And that lead person will go back and get the person's belongings, bring it out so the individual can get the medications, and then take the bag back. Okay?
Question?
Yes.
So if they want to go out to smoke, do they have to come and check their jacket out each time and then bring their jacket back and check it back in each time?
So jackets they're allowed to keep. Okay, and we don't search them. Okay, but their jackets are allowed to keep. Backpacks, they can't bring in their carts, all those kinds of things, sleeping bags and all that. That all gets checked in, but they get to keep the coats. Okay. Again, no personal bedding or belongings allowed inside. Everything's got to be checked in. Pets, again, will be crated, except for service and companion pets. Now, we don't check for paperwork. If they say it's a service animal, or if they say it's a companion pet, that's fine. That animal does not have to be crated. However, if that animal starts acting out, it will have to be crated or they'll have to leave. Okay? But we do not discriminate because they have a pet and they say we cannot single them out. We cannot force them to crate a service pet, a service animal. It's not a pet. Okay?
And what about people that come in wanting to bring food and drink in with them?
There's not going to be any outside food or beverages allowed. Everything is going to have to be checked in. Everything. So if they have food, they can go back outside before they check in for the night. When they want to turn in their property, they can go out there and eat it outside before they check in. But once they check in, all that has to be checked in their property. Okay? And they can get it the next morning. Leaving the facility, again, they're allowed to go in and out to smoke, but if they leave the property for any reason, and then they come back a couple hours later, they don't get to come back in. They can come back in to get their property, but they leave for the rest of the night. And that's on the lead person to enforce that. Nobody else. Okay? Alcohol, drugs, weapons are not allowed. If you see a knife or something like any kind of a weapon, or someone has a bottle of alcohol, notify your lead, and he or she could have the conversation with that individual. And if they decide they want to check it in, that's fine. Again, these are just guidelines. It's all about the behaviors, right? It's all about the behaviors. If they're acting out, we address the behavior. Okay? And quiet hours are from 10 to 5:30. You'll have some people that are going to be a little noisy. It's up to the lead and the volunteers to go over and see if there's something they can do to help them relax. Talk to them. Talk in a nice, calm voice. Remember, a lot of these individuals are used to sleeping outside, and it's a very traumatizing thing to have to come in and sleep around people. Some of them had robbed them, beat them up, done things like that, assaulted them, things, or just being indoors, cooped up with 80 other people is very uncomfortable for them. So they're going to might be a little agitated. So just let the lead and calm them down, okay? And absolutely no sexual activity. Any questions?
Yes. Minors.
No minors. What about minors, Ashley?
Hop up there, actually, to answer questions. Hey, thanks, Jen.
So our mission here is to save lives. So I just want to reiterate that going into answering that question. Our first hope is with a minor family is being able to contact a family designated shelter, which we are still in the final throes of being able to commit to. So information regarding a family-specific shelter hopefully will be coming out in the Volunteer Warming Network email later. We unfortunately weren't able to nail it down prior to this evening. If a family does arrive at your warming shelter, it is up to the lead to make space for them. For example, here at First Pres, there are alternative options in the back rooms for families. It's nothing that we're specifically promoting, but the biggest thing is saving lives. So we want kids out of the weather, we want parents out of the weather. Will it involve more intense supervision, making sure we're doing our rounds more diligently? Yes. And then following through after that evening with contacting Family Promise and other family designated shelters and facilities to get them into an alternative situation the next night. So that's the answer for like an immediate emergent, they show up.
Like an unaccompanied 15-year-old girl is more what I'm asking about.
The same process. We would want to put her away safely, make sure that's the lead will parcel out a space for her, and then we look into alternative options. Community Action is home to the first ever youth emergency shelter, and the contact information is in the binder that we can get a hold of and try to get them directed that way if they come early enough in the evening. Any other questions regarding the expectations before we go on?
Pets. What if they're really noisy? Is there an expectation of the guests if they leave their pets are unruly in the crate, or how does that?
That's going to come down to a case-by-case basis. Generally, you're going to try to work with the client to try to de-escalate the animal themselves, but there will come to a point that we have to be cognizant of everyone else in the facility. So the lead is going to be trained to make that call if we're going to have to ask it's just like a behavior, right? It's with a person. If a person is being unruly and they're interrupting the space of others, we would ask them to leave. So it's the same expectations, but we're going to try really hard not to get there.
After someone to leave for any reason, for time, actually, I would say if you have detailed questions, come to leave. Train.
Okay, so just to save on time, I'm going to move forward really quick. If you have any other detailed questions, please come to the lead training directly after or meet with myself, DJ, Ken, Jimmy, or Amy. We'll happily discuss those with you, and we'll take note of them and try to get them out on the email listserv. Really quickly, because I want to be respectful of your time, there are forms that you're going to need to be familiar with and processes as a volunteer. So what you're going to see at each facility is a snazzy binder like this. It has all the forms that you need to operate a shift. It has a copy of your manual also included. So the first form is your shift sign-in log. So that's just for your volunteers, for you all to sign in on your shifts. There's one designated for shift 1, 2, and 3. It is going to ask you for your name and emergency contact information and what position you've been assigned to by your volunteer. So are you checking in? Are you a roamer? Are you just a watcher? Are you hospitality? So it kind of just gives the lay of the land, and that's really helpful when maybe you're a shift 2 or 3 and you're transitioning in. You're going to kind of be able to have the lay of the land, who was before you, where they were at. This is just a simple guest registration sheet. This is what we're going to be asking our guests to fill in and sign in. They're going to be assigned bracelets with ID numbers that match their belongings as well. This is our incident report sheet. Most likely this is going to be completed by a lead, but I wanted you guys to see what it looked like, because all this information gets compiled and it's saved in the binder, as well as sent over to our headquarters at Arches for us to review. The incident report is really just covering what happened, what did we do about it, and what were the the witnesses, excuse me. And this just helps us keep a better eye on maybe we're going to be seeing an escalation in aggressive behaviors, or maybe we see an escalation of people bringing weapons and refusing to not part with them. And so we're going to be able to establish patterns and come up with better mechanisms to be prepared over time. So this is where notifications will go out in your email as well. This is incredibly important as a volunteer, and this is something you will be completing. This is basically a shift summary log. So we have heard in the past that there have been issues with transitioning. So when a shift 2 is coming on, or a shift 3, you want to have as much information as possible so you can be comfortable within your shift. And so that means you want to know, are there any persons of interest? Were there any notable actions taken, like separating a group? Are there any notable concerns in the shift? So we're asking at the end of each shift, or even just during, that volunteers complete this 1, 2, and 3. Any notes, concerns, guests to monitor, or notable actions taken. Were the police called? So this is everything that your folks need to know going through the night. So it's really
all volunteers filling that out, or just the lead?
The lead will assign designated shifts. So the lead will say, I want you to be in charge of the summary log tonight. And so that'll be your responsibility to complete it. And one more time, please. All right, so during shift 2, there is a supply inventory that is taken around midnight. The lead will also assign this responsibility. We've got crates at each facility that have all of your supplies needed to operate a warming shelter. However, if we're running low, we need to have a mechanism to get that information back to headquarters so we can resupply for the next activation. So on the left is the master sheet. Like, this is in the binder. This tells you how many of each item need to be in that container, and at what point do you need to issue an alert. Say, hey, I need to get this refilled. On the right is your order request form. So this is something that you're going to send to me, or you'll call it in to me, saying we need 20 more Kleenexes, or we need 30 more blankets. And this will tell other volunteers the next night or even the next shift that something's been ordered, somebody's already on this.
So we should call you at midnight each night with that?
Well, you can leave a voicemail. I'll still get it. You can snap a picture, email it to me. That's totally fine. I'm not going to answer at midnight, most likely. All right, going on next. So what's really important is, how are you going to sign up for a shift? That's really important. So if you could just go to the, Rob, can you go to the, I don't think the link actually works here. I tried to do it, but it is already ready to go on the Google. You see it? The link doesn't work very well. I already have it loaded, ready to go on Google. Oh, that's okay. Click out of it. He admitted to me earlier he's an Apple guy, and I just gave him a Windows. All right. Yep. Can you expand it a smidge? All right. Who's a window aficionado? Okay. All right. So there we go. So this is what you're going to see emailed out to you before activation. This is an example of a yellow light, be on standby 48 hours before activation email. Oh. Hey, that's all right. We're getting there. All right, so it's going to list all 3 sites that you can sign up for. There's a nice little reminder of the shifts, then the time, and the date. See, Saturday, October 20th. And I think we're all in agreement that's going to mean the first shift of the night. That is going to be the 20th all the way through the 3rd shift. We're not going to clock over the next day like the rest of the world tells us to. So if you just want to click, hey, I want to volunteer at First Presbyterian, it's going to say click here to register for First Presbyterian. That sounds fantastic. It's going to take you to your sign-up sheet. It'll go, I promise. All right, so it's going to give you options of your shifts to sign up for. It's going to look a little muddled, but you're going to see there's a distinction. See shift 3 lead, shift 3, shift 1 lead, shift 1. Unless you are a lead, please do not sign up for the lead shift. You're going to want just the generic shift 3. So I like that 3 o'clock to 7:30 time at First Pres. So I'm going to hit the green sign up button. And you just hit your email. It'll prompt you with your email. It's going to ask you, have you previously volunteered before? Have you gone through the orientation? And to provide your name. And that's about it. And then you'll be signed up for your shift. So this just told me that on Saturday, October 20th, for shift 3 from 3 to 7, I'm supposed to be at First Presbyterian. That is all going to be compiled and sent to your shift lead so they know to expect you the day of. And like I said, that was a standby yellow email. You're going to get a confirmation email the day of activation. That's our we're going green. It's actually happening. The weather did not change. Please arrive to the shift that you signed up for. I do want to reiterate, you can go back to the PowerPoint if you'd like. I do want to reiterate that this presentation will be provided on a link via the email listserv. So if you have not given us your email, if you did not receive emails from us already, please sign up over there at the front desk. We're going to send this out with the link to CCTV, but it's also going to be compiled with the PowerPoint. So you're going to be able to zoom in and see those letters a little better. I think we anticipated those to show up a little larger than we thought. We are also building into each each night of activation at 5:45 to 6:15. If you have any questions, if you've read the volunteer manual, which is also going to be sent out via email, if you've read the manual and you have questions, please sign up to that half hour before time. That's a great time to ask your lead those qualifying questions, to get reorientated with the specifics. That's why we built it in there, so you can become comfortable with the manual, you can ask those specific questions. So any final
We
questions
share
real
an
quick?
email address,
Mhm.
so can we go in and can we sign up both of us on that one line for name, or do we each need to go back in and sign up again to get both of us registered?
You're gonna have to sign up twice.
Okay.
If there's somebody who hasn't come to this but wants to come and volunteer, can they sign up just through our website?
So they do need to go through the volunteer training. So we're going to encourage them to come to that night of activation at 5:45 time. That's why we built that in there, because we recognize that not everyone has signed up yet. So they're going
How
to.
do they sign up?
They don't. They need to come to that 5:45 time. There will be listed, on our Facebook activation times, on our website. So if they hear about us, please show up, and then we can train you and orientate you at that time. We'll get your email address. We'll add you to the email listserv, and then they'll be ready to go next activation. It could be next day, but that's how we're just getting people orientated. The access point is 5:45. And I'll take one more question.
We got snow. We notify us at 12, so we can go on a 11 o'clock shift. We're not gonna get that. Last year I had to call about 9 o'clock in the morning to make me pick up at 10:30 at night. Make the shift.
Interesting.
Yeah, like that, yeah.
Okay, duly noted.
So you'll know your shift though.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, all right. I did want, with everybody here, just to let folks know, the City of Salem is an incredible partner in this as well. They're covering the extra utilities for each of those sites, as well as Chariots is an amazing partner in this project. Anyone around the city can get a ride to the warming center that night, and so they've confirmed that that would be available. That would be available for volunteers during their operating hours if you're on first shift. But the gentleman is right. Even if Yellow Cab is a go on getting volunteers to the site, it can take a long time. So you should be prepared for that in advance, that if you need assistance from Yellow Cab, it will take some time. We should probably. So again, if you are a person with loads of questions, you can come to the lead time and be well informed. Otherwise, if you are very at peace with being a general volunteer, we would just say thank you, and we are going to see you later this winter.
Yeah, I got a question.